What is going on, guys, and welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name is Bernie. Thank you for joining us today on the Touchdowns to Home Runs show. Hope that your day is going absolutely fantastic. Now, the NBA draft and NBA free agency are quickly approaching us, and for the Raptors, it's going to be a very crucial period on the horizon of what I think is going to be a very busy offseason for the Raptors. But potentially the biggest issue that they actually do need to address is that lack of depth at the center position. So today we'll be breaking down several different players, first looking into the free agency pool, and then looking into the NBA draft, and picking out some players that I really think are not only likely options for the Raptors, but also impact players as early as next year. Now, just before we do get into the breakdown, though, just a little side note in terms of the free agents that I picked out. I did try to stay away from as many restricted free agents as possible. Not that the Raptors shouldn't target any of them, but I do think just given the way that teams are allowed to match the contracts makes it a lot tougher to predict, but also tougher for the Raptors to actually acquire these players, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. So in terms of the free agency, the first guy that I got is Rashawn Holmes. Now, Rashawn Holmes, in terms of Raptors free agency targets, is probably the name that is being circulated around the most. And he's coming off a phenomenal year. He's only 27 years old. Again, a career year where he averaged 14.2 points per game, 8.3 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks. Now, when you look at sort of the centers around the league, Rashawn Holmes isn't a massive name, but he would be a huge impact player for the Raptors. He's a guy who would be able to push near a double-double, put up double-digit points, and do some things for the Raptors very well offensively. But the biggest thing that you would be getting from Rashawn Holmes is he's a very solid defender. Able to clean up the boards, which is something obviously the Raptors can use, and really be able to be sort of a lockdown defender at that 5 position. Now, with the increase of production from Holmes last year, of course, the valuation of his contract is expected to go up. He made only $5 million last year. I expect if the Raptors do sign him, it would be in the range of about $10 to $15 million per year. Hopefully not more than that. And you got to expect that there would be several teams other than the Raptors also interested in signing Holmes, being sort of in the upper tier of the free agency class in terms of centers. But the Raptors really do have the ability, I think, to go out and make this move. You definitely have the space to do this. And you should have the money as well, because other than re-signing Kyle Lowry, potentially Gary Trent Jr. and Khem Birch, you do have some money in contracts freeing up, So yeah, I do think that they would definitely be able to go out, get a guy like this. And I think this is probably the most likely target, at least in the free agency pool. Another name that I've heard circulating around a lot is Nerlens Noel. But I'm going to come out and say it. I don't think the Raptors should necessarily sign him. Unless, he's a third option center or something. Now, this is no knock on Nerlens Noel. I think it's just the way that the Raptors roster sort of balances out. Because, I want the Raptors to go out and sign a starter. Not that Khem Birch did anything wrong last year. I think he actually did a great job sort of filling in. But I think that the Raptors are best with him off the bench. And, you look at a guy like Rashawn Holmes, who would be able to slot into the starting 5. I think that is a much better option. But Nerlens Noel does a lot of things right. Last season, only averaged 5.1 points per game, 6.4 boards, 2.2 blocks, and 1.1 steals. Now, doesn't put up the biggest offensive stats, but, does a lot of small things right in terms of what he does defensively. Was actually the only player last season to average at least 2 blocks and a steal. So again, showcasing those little things that Nerlens Noel does. And again, if he's not a starting center option and you want to bring him off the bench, I do think that this is a solid option. I just think, Rashawn Holmes, a guy like that has to be your first priority when you're looking in the free agency pool, because I think you're trying to pick a starting center, not a backup center. But he is also very cheap. I think you're looking right around where his contract was last year. You're looking $5 million, which is 50% of what you would be paying Holmes. So yeah, definitely an option to provide depth. Don't like him in the starting lineup. Jarrett Allen is the only restricted free agent that I put in this sort of list. But I think, being the best center in this free agency pool, it's worth at least giving him a look. Now, last year averaged 12.8 points per game, 10 rebounds, 1.4 blocks. Does a lot of things right. Again, I think he's the most talented center in this free agency pool. Only thing is, I don't see a scenario where Cleveland doesn't re-sign him, and there's been rumors that his contract is going to be around or north of $100 million in total. And, of course, the Raptors would actually have to beat that, because anything the Raptors put down, Cleveland would be able to match. So I just don't know if it's worth it. But if you can somehow get him, like somehow Cleveland doesn't want him, and all of a sudden you can get Jarrett Allen in the range of 4 years, $80 million. I think this is definitely the player that you put your money into. So, restricted free agent, highly unlikely that you get him in my opinion, but I think, in terms of at least taking a look, in terms of even putting potentially an offer out there, I think, there's really no loss here when you're looking at Jarrett Allen. Flipping over to the draft, I'm going to cover Evan Mobley real quick. Now, again, I've said in previous videos, I've said multiple times that, it would be a best case scenario if somehow Evan Mobley did fall down to the Toronto Raptors at 4. And I think Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, Evan Mobley are pretty set in that 1 to 3 position. So again, I highly doubt that this would happen, but in 2020, 2021, of course, averaged 16.4 points per game, 8.7 rebounds, 2.4 assists, and 2.9 blocks. Mobley is, of course, a great inside player, which makes him one of the most intriguing prospects because he's probably the best two-way player in the draft, and, he's very capable on defense. He's got great size, a natural jumping ability that makes him a tremendous rim protector. And, of course, what would make Mobley super, super enticing for the Raptors is he's the only guy that can immediately address the Raptors center issue. There's no question about it that Evan Mobley is, in my opinion, the most developed center in a position that is really hard to develop. And there's a lot to like here. The two-way thing that Evan Mobley does is just absolutely phenomenal. And again, positionally would make a lot of sense for the Raptors. But when we talk about the NBA draft, I want to talk about realistic guys, which most likely comes in the second round, with your 46, 47 picks. And Charles Bassey is a guy that I really like, a 6'11", 235-pound center out of Western Kentucky. Again, with that 46, 47 pick, I think Bassey is a guy who would be a huge win if he does fall down to the Raptors at this position. 2020, 2021, 17.6 points per game, 11.6 rebounds, 3.1 blocks. He's a guy that has developed a ton. I think he played 3 years in college, and he developed each one of those years for sure. Entered the draft a couple of times before actually sticking in this year. But when you look at Bassey, he's super exciting, and I think he would definitely be a fan favorite. A guy with a really solid frame, allows him to be a great inside player and a terrific shot blocker. He's got size, athleticism. When you combine those two, he's phenomenal. He's a high-energy player, would come off the bench for the Raptors, but could be a massive contributor for them there. And develop into a real star. He's got a lot of potential. Wouldn't be able to immediately address the 5 the same way a guy like Evan Mobley was, but this would be a nice pick late in the second round. And also a guy Masai Ujiri knows a lot about. Won the MVP of Masai's Giants of Africa program. So if anybody in the league, I've said this before, if anybody in the league, any front office has definitely looked into this kid, it is the Toronto Raptors and Masai Ujiri. So you got to imagine that if they do select this guy, that they definitely know what they're doing. There's a couple other guys that I like. I'm going to sort of briefly go through them. I like Queta out of Utah State, played 3 years over there, 7 foot, 245-pound center, averaged 14.9 points per game, just over 10 rebounds, almost 3 assists and over 3 blocks a game. Had quite a number of games where he was, north of 5 blocks per game. I think his season high was like 9 blocks in a single game. Was like 3rd in the country in blocks per game, and I think he led the nation in total blocks. Only number 65 on ESPN's draft board, which is super, super surprising because, he's a guy who could easily convert into a double-digit machine in the NBA, and what he gives you in terms of the rim protecting is just absolutely unheard of. Now, he is raw talent. He's a guy who would come off the bench for the Raptors, but again, in the second round, 46, 47 pick, I'm looking for guys who could just absolutely be steals for the Raptors, and, at this point, you're not expecting an immediate impact starter because those are first-round players. But again, these are guys who could develop, in my opinion, into stars. But anyways, guys, that's going to be all for today. If you did make it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts, comments, predictions on anything that I went over today. If you did enjoy today's video, make sure to let me know by smashing that thumbs up button, subscribing to Touchdowns to Home Runs for more Raptors content just like this. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.